Let's step inside this elite ballroom. It fell dead silent the moment Eleanor raised her glass. 300 wealthy guests turned to look down on Silas, standing there in a cheap, borrowed suit. Eleanor's voice cut clean and cold. "Too poor to buy the silver on this table, Mr. Renwick. Too poor to ever court my daughter." Hadley froze right between them, but Silas did not answer. He did not even flinch. Tucked in his pocket was a sealed letter from a major corporate buyout firm, dated 3 days ago. That socialite smirked, completely clueless that she had just declared war on the secret new owner of her family empire. April rolled into Charleston like it always does, thick, slow, and heavy with humidity. The azaleas blooming along Trad Street felt like quiet little acts of confession. Silas Renwick quietly signed the lease on that little Anson Street cottage on the 14th. He paid 6 months up front with a Boston cashier's check. No one in this arrogant high society town questioned the quiet single father. The cottage was tiny, just 2 bedrooms and a front porch with a single lonely rocking chair. Out back, a wild magnolia tree scraped against the gutters whenever the harbor wind picked up. Little Wren claimed her bedroom, leaving Silas to take the smaller leftover room. On their second morning, Wren found an old screen door on the back porch that did not shut right. She pointed it out to her dad, using the universal silent language of an 8-year-old. Silas knelt down to inspect the rusted hinge and promised her he would fix it. Yet he did not fix it that day. He did not even touch it for a week. The door stayed crooked because sometimes the only way to start over was letting small things stay broken. You and I have probably felt that exact same way before. The historic Beaumont Inn sat just 4 blocks south, right down Trad Street. Built of 1847 brick, it was the absolute crown jewel of the Peton family empire. Silas toured the luxury property alongside the old construction foreman that Tuesday morning. The foreman pointed out crumbling plaster, ruined cornices, and a massive structural beam sagging dangerously for 11 straight years. Silas just listened. He had already memorized the engineering reports on his flight down. The massive project kickoff landed on Thursday. He arrived 10 minutes early, wearing a simple denim shirt and scuffed boots from years of hard actual labor. Hadley Peton strolled in 2 minutes late, completely alone, with a sleek leather folder tucked under her arm. At 36 years old, she confidently introduced herself, immediately calling him by his first name. She did not even bother introducing him, completely dismissing him. Silas calmly unrolled the structural blueprints across the conference table. He read those plans like a master pianist reading sheet music, seeing the whole harmony, not just single notes. Flipping straight to sheet 3, he tapped a weak joint right near that sagging second-floor beam. He plainly stated, "This ceiling will collapse under a live load unless we reinforce it before demolition even starts." Hadley stared down at the blueprint, then slowly looked up at him. That silent stare lingered a second longer than any look with a hired contractor ever should. Right behind him, the heavy corridor door suddenly pushed open just a crack. Little Wren had been waiting in the lobby with a coloring book, but she wandered off. Peeking through the gap, the 8-year-old stood with her dark braid falling loose. Hadley spotted her first. Hadley flashed her a smile, that cheap Charleston charm that costs nothing, yet carries a heavy, silent weight. Silas caught that look, smoothly stepped between them and said, "Wren, back to the foyer." "Give me 10 minutes. His daughter left and Silas firmly shut the heavy door. He refused to look Hadley's way again, letting her believe she held all the power. "Come with me." At 7 that evening, inside his tiny cottage, Silas finally opened the worn letter from Boston. Inside was a single faded photograph. Let's begin with that old photograph from summer 2011. Marin on the Beaumont Inn steps, glowing in a yellow dress with magnolias behind her. She was only 28 back then. Today, she would have been 38. Silas silently turned the faded photo face down on the wooden table. Tiny Wren wandered in barefoot, clutching a cracker. "Daddy, where are we?" The quiet father stared at the blank back of the photo for a long, heavy second. "Where Mommy used to be." Wren nodded as if that explained all of Charleston. Then she just finished her snack and asked about dinner. 3 weeks into the historic restoration project, Silas spread the subcontractor bids across his dining table one quiet Saturday. He worked relentlessly, grinding away far past midnight on Sunday. By 6 Monday morning, he had mapped out the entire financial analysis by hand on one sheet of cream paper. The historic plaster contract was overcharged by 38%. The vendor was Heritage Restoration Specialists, and their principal was a man named Bradford Peton, nephew to the wealthy family matriarch Eleanor, Hadley's own cousin. Any ordinary blue-collar worker would have just ignored this. Most guys looked the other way when it came to corrupt jobs like this. The inflated budget could easily cover it, and the restoration would still happen. The family empire would easily absorb the cost, but Silas refused. He quietly left the paper on Hadley's desk at 7:20, right before she arrived. His clean handwriting outlined price benchmarks across 4 major historic preservation projects. He detailed an exact return calculation proving the massive overcharge on the contract. And sitting right at the bottom was a single legal citation. A Delaware Chancery Court ruling regarding the fiduciary duties of corporate shareholders. Signed with 2 simple letters, S.R. Hadley found it at 8:04. She studied it again at 8:11, but she never called her cousin or her powerful mother. She didn't march down the hall to demand how a common laborer knew complex corporate law. She just sat silently at her desk. For a long minute, she watched the morning light hit the historic building across King Street. And then she drafted a brand new email to the project's compliance team. She formally requested a quiet standard rebid on the overpriced plasterwork contract. That new bid dropped 19%, and the honest contract went out next Tuesday. Her furious cousin phoned the matriarch, Eleanor, that Wednesday afternoon. The arrogant matriarch listened carefully, but she never called Hadley. Instead, Eleanor opened her sleek laptop and typed 3 simple words into the search bar. Silas Renwick, contractor. The online results were frankly pathetic. Just a simple Boston builder's license and some tiny Massachusetts company. A 4-year-old charity dinner photo from Cambridge. Silas in a sharp suit beside a woman whose face was turned completely away. Eleanor slammed the laptop shut and immediately dialed her personal assistant. Find absolutely everything on this nobody foreman at the Beaumont Restoration. Pay close attention here. That Wednesday, Hadley crossed paths with Silas on the 2nd floor. He carried a carpenter's level, while she held a corporate binder. They didn't even stop walking, she only murmured. The plaster rebid came in much cleaner. He simply replied, glad to hear it. Neither slowed down, but Hadley paused at the stairs, watching this supposedly ordinary contractor walk away. She stared at him like a forbidden door her powerful family warned her never to open. They think he's nobody, but the man they look down on today will decide their entire future tomorrow. You and I know how a dynasty bleeds, small thefts, quiet fraud hidden away in the dark. The arrogant elite called Hadley paranoid, claiming she did not understand how a real legacy worked. Yet here stood an overlooked laborer in boots who had casually analyzed 4 blueprints and a single column of figures, instantly spotting the fraud she spent years tracking. She had no clue who this invisible builder was, or what he built before arriving here. She did not know who signed his cheap lease, or what silent grit actually brought him here, or whose quiet, lonely grave he visited on chilly October weekends. She only cared about his math. His financial analysis was spotless and completely right. For the first time in 11 years, she realized a simple worker saw their ruin coming. That late May Saturday brought a gorgeous Charleston morning, the kind that made the city famous. Golden harbor light spilled warm and low across the famous coastal battery. The summer cicadas had not yet begun, and the giant magnolia behind the Beaumont mansion sat at the peak of its white bloom. Silas brought young Wren to the construction site, simply because she asked him. The 8-year-old had quietly begged to tag along, and the rough crew was off today. He let his daughter play outside, while he worked upstairs with a cheap clipboard and pencil. He handled the slow, tedious job of measuring a window stuck open since 1971. Hadley walked down the brick path at 10:15, never expecting to see a laborer's child. The rich heiress visited because she came here nearly every Saturday. To her, this walled garden was the only corner of the estate that did not feel suffocating. Little Wren sat right by the giant magnolia tree, quietly studying a green fern. Hadley sat on the brick ledge beside her, playfully asking what the fern thought of the weather. Without looking up, Wren said the fern was busy, making Hadley laugh out loud. That was the first time she had laughed on this rich property in 9 months. She held on to that tiny moment of joy, like receiving an unexpected letter from someone dear. She stayed silent, choosing instead to sit quietly and listen to the little fern. After a few quiet seconds, Ren softly said, "My mommy is in heaven. My dad says heaven is the place where magnolias are always the quietest." Hadley did not answer right away, just watching the green fern alongside Ren. Finally, she whispered, "I had a cousin who said almost the exact same thing. She loved this quiet garden much more than any other place in the city. She taught me how to read a complex corporate ledger when I was 16. We sat on that bench every Sunday, and she would point here, calling this tree the only honest thing on this massive estate." Ren looked up at her. "What was her name?" "Her name was Marin." The little girl whispered that forgotten name, nodded once, and went back to her fern. "You and I know small details matter. Upstairs, that old window was open 6 inches. The overlooked laborer had heard every single word, standing completely frozen in the quiet room. The pencil stayed still on his clipboard, his calloused hand resting heavily upon it. Outside, his young daughter was talking to an elite stranger about her late mother, and this wealthy stranger was remembering a woman who had also been Silas's own wife. They were both speaking about the very same person, yet neither of them realized it. He finally lowered his clipboard with the absolute care of a man handling something fragile. Minutes later, he quietly walked down the stairs, kicked off his dusty boots, and stepped into the garden in his socks. "Watch this shift with me." Ren ran over, and Hadley stood up staring with deep respect. This quiet laborer stared back, holding her entire future in his hands. Both kept quiet, neither daring to bridge the gap between their worlds. Hadley broke the silence, whispering, "She once walked barefoot here too, wearing a yellow dress. I think it was 2011. I still have a picture somewhere," Silas replied. "I remember that dress." He left it at that, and she did not press. They lingered in the dirt until Ren chased a butterfly, pulling them back to a safer, simpler conversation. Yet they both now carried the weight of that silent, unspoken bond. The arrogant Eleanor stormed back from New York on the 2nd of June, trailed by her foul, polished temper. 3 days fighting a private equity firm over bond structures left her blind to the fact that her empire was slipping away. She touched down in Charleston, landed at 4:20, and stormed into her high-class office by 5:30. She swept right past Hadley's open door without even looking inside. Their grand charity gala was locked in for the 17th of June. A black tie affair for 300 elites, including the mayor and the bishop, along with major financial backers they desperately needed to win back after 3 years. On June 8th, Eleanor's loyal assistant of 22 years, Greta, marched into Hadley's office and silently dropped a small ivory envelope onto her desk. She didn't linger. Nobody wanted to be around for Eleanor's little paper bombs. Hadley tore it open. It was not a request but a suffocating decree of her future. Eleanor wrote that she would announce Hadley's engagement to an elite heir at the gala, the billionaire heir to the prestigious Ashcroft banking dynasty on Broad Street, a family that had been high society allies for 4 generations. Eleanor had treated her daughter's marriage like a corporate merger, brokered in secret. Hadley would obey, and the public announcement would look flawless. The press would be controlled, leaving Hadley staring at the cruel words in shock. She had not even seen this supposed perfect suitor in 8 years. The last time they met, the wealthy heir had clumsily spilled a glass of champagne all over her shoes. She marched straight to her mother's office, where the family matriarch sat working. Shutting the door, she refused to sit. "You did not even consult me." "I did not need to. You will marry someone who fits our empire. Whitman is suitable, his money is suitable, and this timing is perfect, Hadley. Elite women do not wait to be courted by some nobody. But you and I know how quickly that arrogance is going to crumble." Hadley stood frozen in the doorway for one silent moment, then turned and walked out. Skipping her office entirely, she drove south through the historic district with all her windows rolled down. She cruised right past their corporate offices and past the sprawling luxury marina. She even sped past the massive family estate where she grew up, never slowing down. Her whole life had been spent bowing to her mother's ironclad rules. Those sacrifices had become so quiet, she forgot the heavy price she was paying. She drove straight to the Beaumont, parking on a dark, quiet side street. Walking around to the hidden harbor porch, she kicked off her expensive designer shoes and sat on the steps in the pitch black. At 8:40, Silas walked around the corner. Watch closely now as the future takes its first step. Drawn by a silent instinct, he carried a heavy flashlight he did not even turn on. Seeing her on the step, he walked up the dirt path quietly, demanding absolutely nothing. He sat one step below her, a humble spot for the man destined to buy her entire family legacy, and offered some water. She drank and set it down. As the harbor lights blinked, you and I know whose empire this will soon be. Picture this, a shrimp boat drifting past Sullivan's Island, quiet, slow, and completely ignored. 23 minutes slipped by in heavy, absolute silence. When Hadley finally stood, she placed her hand gently on his shoulder as she walked by. Just once, the effortless way someone leans on a railing they completely trust. Then she headed down the path, got in her car, and drove home. That quiet father sat alone on the cold step for another hour. He kept his flashlight off. June 17th arrived, sweltering and deceptively clean. For 58 years, the Peton Mansion Ballroom opened only twice annually. In all that time, their elite gala never failed to blind their wealthy, clueless guests. Towering white columns and 3 sparkling crystal chandeliers. 1880 originals, a string quartet playing, and 300 guests in formal black tie. They served high society Charleston rice and fresh chilled oysters. The wine was a dry Sonoma vintage the Peton family had funded since 1994. We see this blind arrogance everywhere, don't we? Grand rooms polished by working hands that would never be allowed to stand inside them. The grand room looked breathtaking, designed to project an illusion of absolute perfection. That was their world. Silas was dismissed as mere lighting crew. They threw the custom lighting rig into the project at the absolute last minute. As lead, he had to stay all night, running temporary rigs from a dimmer panel hidden in the service hallway. He wore a cheap, borrowed suit from one of his younger restoration guys. The shoulders were slightly too wide, but he couldn't care less about their standards. Hidden deep inside his coat pocket lay that heavy, explosive envelope. Foster Linwood had slipped it to him 3 days ago in an East Bay lot. He hadn't opened it yet, still weighing the massive power that key would unlock. Hadley caught his eye from across the room at 8:12. She approached in silence. Stopping close, she pretended to watch him check the dimmer panel and quietly spoke. "Thank you for the water," he replied. "Of course." She spoke again. "She is announcing it tonight." He nodded slowly. "I know." They lingered a moment longer, locked in an unspoken, powerful conversation. From afar, the elite matriarch watched, her face masking the cruel, premature judgments of a dying dynasty. Whitman Ashcraft IV swaggered over at 8:19, wearing the smug smile of a fool who thought he owned tomorrow. Hadley took one quiet half-step back. Whitman kept grinning, but the entire crowd felt that subtle rejection. 3 high society women saw it. Eleanor definitely saw it. She set her glass down. She stormed into the service corridor, cornering the quiet tradesman to arrogantly put him in his place. She extended a check. "Twice your yearly income, Mr. Renwick." "Cashier's check. You finished the Beaumont job through your crew lead by proxy. You leave Charleston tomorrow morning, and you take the child far away with you. The Peton family wishes you luck in Boston." Silas studied the check, then looked right at her. No anger, no tension, he just looked at her and quietly replied, "No, ma'am." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. She wanted predictable poor man's rage. This cold, silent confidence terrified her. The proud matriarch marched back to the center of the ballroom, raising her glass high. A sudden, heavy silence rippled outward through the crowd. "Before I welcome our extraordinary guests," she announced, "I must address something that has deeply distressed me tonight." Every eye turned. "There is a tradesman here tonight mistaken about his place. They always misjudge the quiet ones, don't they? He is far too poor to buy the silver on these tables, Mr. Renwick. Too poor to court my daughter. I trust you won't embarrass yourself further." Hadley froze. I took the insult without blinking. I let them sneer. In my pocket, an unopened letter from Foster Linwood had been waiting for 3 days. Eleanor smirked at her own cruelty, clueless that she'd just insulted the man who holds her entire future. 3 mornings after that gala, on June 20th, Foster Linwood finally called my quiet little cottage directly. He didn't even state his name. He just gave me a service entrance address at the Beaumont Inn and a time, 2 p.m. Just one instruction. I slipped through the back kitchen at exactly 1:58. Foster waited down in the wine cellar, a thick stone vault right beneath the main dining room. 1847 brick kept freezing cold, always locked, and Foster held the key. He bolted the heavy door behind me. Foster Linwood was 62 years old. For 34 years, he served as the top corporate lawyer for the wealthy Peton family. Let's rewind. In 2020, he stood silently in the back at Marin's Boston funeral, totally ignored by everyone. I recalled the back of that chapel. I didn't remember seeing the man there, but I really should have. Foster was the only one wearing a Peton tie pin, a tiny silver magnolia tucked beneath his dark suit lapel. Marin would have recognized it. He always saw those tiny details. Now Foster slapped 3 manila folders onto the oak tasting table. "Sit, Silas." Foster flipped open the first folder, Renwick Holdings, a Massachusetts limited partnership. The principal was me, hiding through 14 shell companies across Delaware, Nevada, Wyoming, and the Caymans. My current stake in Peton Hospitality voting stock, 47.3%. I secretly bought it up between January 2019 and April of this very year. I didn't blink. I already knew my corporate buyout to the third decimal. Foster opened the second file, Eleanor's pandemic-era debt from spring 2020. She had taken a massive margin loan, putting the family's sacred preferred shares up as collateral. She arrogantly misjudged the downturn's actual length. By December, the mighty Eleanor Peton quietly defaulted on that very margin loan. Her shares were liquidated through 3 quiet intermediaries. 2 intermediaries, Foster noted, were actually buying for you. The woman accidentally sold her empire to me, the single father she'd just tried bribing with a $10,000 check. I shut my eyes for a second. When I opened them, Foster tapped the third folder. Thursday morning, a 9 a.m. board meeting on the 14th floor of Peton Tower. Agenda item number 3, strategic restructuring. This ruthless move strips Hadley Peton of her chief operating role, handing total operational control right back to Eleanor as chair. Eleanor barely scraped together enough votes from the entitled family directors. She plans to claim she's saving the business from Hadley's supposedly erratic and poor judgment. She'll definitely bring up that plasterwork rebid mess. She'll use that tiny stumble at the gala against her. I stared at the third folder. Foster sighed. "I've sat on this hostile takeover for 11 weeks. Foster continued, "My attorney-client privilege protects every single word I've ever spoken with Eleanor Peton in private." He paused, "But I have absolutely no legal duty to warn her about my chats with you. I'm also not required to tell her the ultimate punchline." He sighed, "That while acting as her top lawyer, I've been making sure your takeover filings quietly cleared. You and I can see the risk he took. I've walked a very dangerous line here, Mr. Renwick." I looked up. Foster held my steady gaze. Foster whispered, "You can stop her Thursday morning." Let's look at the choice he faced. Walk in and stop them, but forever shed his humble contractor disguise. He thought of Marin and little Wren sleeping peacefully in that tiny cottage, the family whose future he was about to secure. He pictured Hadley on the harbor steps, unaware that this quiet contractor now held her entire destiny. He gave one nod. Foster slid the fateful folder across the table. "Then I will see you Thursday morning, June 25th, the lawyer told him. 9th floor lobby of the Peton Tower at 8:40 a.m. Silas rode that elevator to the 14th floor completely alone, carrying their destiny. He wore a sharp charcoal suit, tailored 3 years ago, shedding the simple clothes they used to judge him by. The scuffed boots were gone. His polished shoes were ready to claim power. The opened envelope from Foster rested in his breast pocket, the secret to their looming ruin. The board met at 9 sharp. 12 directors watched Eleanor hold court, blind to their looming fate. Hadley sat nearby, hands flat on her folder, completely unaware that her savior was outside. Foster Linwood quietly took his usual chair. Third from the corner, folders stacked, as Eleanor finally called the meeting to order. "Good morning. Before we review the operational reports, the chair moves under Article 7. Section 3, to address a strategic restructuring of the Chief Operating Officer's role. I won't sugarcoat this. Hadley's leadership has been a true credit to our family for years. However, the company is entering a phase that demands consolidated authority. The chair proposes that all operational duties be temporarily reabsorbed into my own office. Effective immediately, pending a full strategic review. Hadley refused to look up, keeping her hands flat on the folder, bracing for defeat. The door opened, the quiet contractor stepped inside. He strolled in with total calm, already owning the room they denied him. He walked straight to the empty chair, ready to claim his rightful place at the top. "Stick with me here." He took the founder's dusty, untouched seat and simply sat down. Hadley turned, her breath catching in the sudden dead silence of the room. Only Foster noticed, keeping his head down. Eleanor actually laughed, blind to her looming downfall. "Excuse me, Mr. Renwick, why exactly is the contractor sitting in on a closed Peton board session?" Foster slowly stood up, holding the folder that would soon strip Eleanor of her power. He slid their doom down the table, past the directors, stopping right in front of Eleanor. "Madam Chair," Foster announced, "the contractor is the controlling shareholder." The entire boardroom froze solid. She opened it, 47.3% voting common. Renwick Holdings was the shadow partner for 14 shell companies, hiding his massive stake from them all. Notarized, audited, and certified by the Delaware Council of Record. Eleanor stared at the cover page, forced to read her own defeat twice. Her face refused to show her defeat. Instead, she went entirely cold, realizing she had been quietly defeated by the contractor for 6 long years. Only her left hand on the table betrayed the sheer panic of her sudden downfall. Her thumb twitched against her index finger, a tiny nervous sign of her shattered control. Foster remembered her mother doing that exact same thing in 1991, when her entire empire collapsed. He ignored her fear as the other directors scrambled to read the truth of their defeat. Then Silas finally spoke up, revealing his true, powerful voice. His voice was low and calm, he never even stood up. Under Article 7 of the bylaws, a majority holder may. The man they dismissed yesterday now owned their tomorrow. With this written shareholder action, I remove the chair and appoint a successor, bypassing the board. I am exercising that right today. Eleanor Peton is officially removed as chairwoman, and this decision is effective at this very second. Hadley Peton is now appointed chairwoman and chief executive, effective immediately. Foster Linwood remains as interim general counsel under my revised mandate. The strategic restructuring is dead. I placed the signed paper onto the table. Eleanor stood. The mighty matriarch opened her mouth, found no words, and retreated. Hadley stayed glued to her leather portfolio. I simply looked at her once. I didn't speak to those who once mocked me. I just walked, leaving her in charge. She sat all alone at the head of their corporate empire. Let's follow her. Friday, 7:40 in the evening, the heiress parked outside my humble cottage, sitting frozen before stepping out. My little Wren was already asleep. Over peanut butter toast, I had warned my daughter that Miss Hadley might visit. Wren just nodded. Even kids grasp when the balance of power has completely shifted. I opened the door before she could even knock, already pouring 2 glasses of bourbon. It was Marin's favorite. I set them on the kitchen table, sat down, and waited. Hadley gripped her glass tightly with both hands, but didn't take a sip. She asked who Marin was to me. I'd rehearsed my answer for 6 years. I had never said it aloud. She was my wife. My kitchen clock ticked. Outside, a magnolia branch scraped against the gutter. Eleanor Peton Renwick, I added. She arrived in Boston in October 2013, right after your mother banished her. She was vice president of corporate operations. Your mother claimed Marin had temperamental leadership. They voted her out, 8-4. Marin left the corporate tower at 11:15 that Tuesday morning, and she never looked back. Hadley stared at me, unblinking. I met her exactly 4 months after she fell. She was consulting for a hospitality firm on State Street. We got married in May 2014. Ren arrived in 2017. They found the pancreatic cancer in November 2018. She fought for 18 months. She passed away February 4, 2020. Hadley let out a tiny broken gasp. She worked until month 7, even writing a book exploring Southern hospitality history. A manuscript which her trusted editor at a university press located in Charleston published in May 2020. It remains in print today in a soft blue jacket. She named our little girl on a Tuesday afternoon, November 2016. She chose Wren because wrens build their nests exactly where no one expects them to. During her final week, she made one request. She never asked for revenge. She didn't want me to destroy her family's empire. She told me to save it. She believed the business was the very best of her. She wanted it to survive the arrogant fools who broke it, and she added one thing. I paused. She said her cousin Hadley would be ready when it truly mattered. Hadley finally broke down in total silence, weeping the way someone does after suppressing grief for years. You and I know why I stayed still. I let her cry. She sobbed quietly into her clenched fist for almost 4 minutes. I sat quietly across the table watching that magnolia branch. As the dismissed outsider, I didn't look away or try to fix it. When the tears finally stopped, she looked up with heavy, bloodshot eyes. She asked the question we all would. Why not take it yourself? I answered without missing a beat. Because Marin would have given it to you. Hadley closed her eyes, letting out a heavy, exhausted breath. You and I know that exhale, the sheer relief of finally hearing the one truth she had waited her whole life for. She opened her eyes, picked up the bourbon, and took a drink. I followed. Outside, somewhere down Anson Street, a screen door clicked softly shut, and the Charleston night rolled on outside, completely indifferent to our shifting power. 3 weeks drifted by in that slow, steady way an empire settles when the underestimated outsider finally holds all the real authority. Hadley's first board meeting as chair and CEO landed on a Wednesday in mid-July. The stabilization plan passed 9-3. Bradford Peton's corporate fraud, tracked through Heritage Restoration Specialists LLC and 2 vendor accounts, was quietly settled out of court, a hushed exit for the elites who once judged. Eleanor hid out in Palm Beach with lawyers and a Manhattan PR fixer trying to salvage her shattered pride. The Beaumont Inn restoration project entered its final crucial phase. On the Saturday of that 3rd week, Hadley drove to the property in jeans. She strolled into the back garden like someone who finally understood who really held the keys to her family's future. The work crew was thinning out. I was up on the 2nd floor porch, holding a rag and a can of teak oil, quietly working the railing. The daily crew had dropped to just 7 men. Most of the heavy carpentry work wrapped up back in August. Only the patient finish work remained. Stick with me here. This is the kind of detail where 30-year veteran masons wear cotton gloves just to lay one single tile perfectly straight. I stopped checking my Boston emails exactly 3 weeks ago. My massive Boston empire was running itself, just like the quiet powerhouse it always was. I hadn't figured out when to tell them I was never going back. My daughter Wren spotted Hadley first, sprinting down the brick path with a folded paper tightly in both hands. She skidded to a halt 2 feet in front of Hadley, holding it up. I drew you. Hadley gently took the page and unfolded it. A colored pencil sketch by my daughter drawn on the back of a restoration blueprint paper. 3 unlabeled figures stood together underneath one massive sprawling tree. A tall man wearing a flannel shirt, a shorter woman in a dark navy dress, a little girl with a dark braid. Above them, huge white flowers bloomed like open hands. Hadley stared at that picture for a very long time. She didn't say thank you. She didn't call it beautiful. She didn't say a single word. Instead, she knelt on the brick, right at my daughter's eye level, and refolded the paper along its crease, treating it like a priceless artifact that could never be replaced. She tucked it safely away inside her linen shirt pocket. Wren gave a satisfied nod, then dashed off to find a ladybug on the magnolia trunk. I watched the whole thing from the 2nd floor porch. I'd stopped working minutes ago. Later that evening, after the crew packed out and the project trailer finally went dark, Hadley and I sat together on the garden's brick steps. The harbor fell completely quiet. The cicadas began softly buzzing. A single light above the back door cast a thin yellow stripe across the brickwork. Her hand rested on the step. My hand sat on the step beside her, 3 inches between us. Neither of us moved an inch. We didn't need to. We see who holds the future, she whispered. The Beaumont reopens in December. We both know why there is a garden dedication happening today. The tables are turning. Silas turned his head, studying her in the dim light. What will you call it? She finally answered. He stared down at the bricks, a tiny twitch of his mouth, the kind of power shift most miss. A subtle reaction from a man holding back immense power. That would have made her happy, he murmured. The cicadas just kept humming. December hit Charleston just like always, with its pale, wealthy golden sunlight and a bitter harbor breeze forcing everyone into heavy winter coats by 5 p.m. The Beaumont reopened on Saturday the 11th. They hosted a quiet ceremony in the back garden. 80 wealthy elites showed up. The mayor sent his deputy, and the preservation chair made an appearance. Greta stood in the back in her black wool coat, quietly observing this brand-new social order. Greta had brought a tiny bouquet. 3 white camellias inside a simple glass jar tied tightly. She placed them by the old magnolia tree before things started. No signature, she knew her place now. She didn't have to. Marin taught her to fold fine linen back in '97, and Greta remembered. The massive magnolia had dropped its flowers months ago. Still, it glowed from below. The crew placed 3 hidden bulbs there, obeying Silas's quiet but absolute instructions. The soft light caught. Illuminating the lower branches, it transformed the bare canopy into towering, deliberate architecture. A small bronze plaque now sat anchored in the brickwork near the roots, the Eleanor Peton Renwick Memorial Garden. Hadley spoke for 4 minutes, entirely unscripted. "Watch this power shift with me." She didn't mention the corporate empire, nor her mother. She didn't even mention that brutal June boardroom takeover either. Or the restoration, not even the 7 generations of wealthy Petons who once ruled this garden. Instead, she praised a cousin who taught her to read a financial sheet at 16. She spoke of a woman who used to sit on a wooden bench right here, every single Sunday, calling that old magnolia the only honest thing left around. She finally spoke a name she had stubbornly refused to say out loud for years. She repeated the name 3 times, Marin, Marin. Stepping back from the podium, she heard the crowd offer that soft, polite, classic Charleston applause. The polite clapping of an elite class who assumed they still held all the cards. Silas stood tall in the back, his daughter Wren riding on his shoulders in a bright red coat. Her tiny hands gripped his head, keeping her eyes locked entirely on Hadley the whole time. As the guests cleared out, Hadley approached them. The former boss didn't dare speak first. Wren leaned down from Silas's broad shoulders, reaching out one little mittened hand. Hadley accepted it. The 3 of them stood in silence under that giant magnolia. The bronze plaque by their feet caught the final, fading daylight. "Don't go back to Boston," Hadley whispered, finally admitting defeat. Silas studied her for a long moment. He didn't smile. He looked at her like a man holding the very future they once told him he couldn't have. "We weren't planning to." A heavy pause followed. "If that is an invitation, we accept." She nodded once and he nodded back. Wren flashed a wide, toothy grin, pure and simple because she was only 8. And an 8-year-old knows exactly what staying means long before the adults finally admit it. The 3 turned around, walking down that old brick pathway together, heading toward the heavy gate. The evening light slowly drained from the sky behind them. The iron gate clicked shut. She begged the dismissed man to stay. "Never forget, he now holds their entire future."